this week to really get some good progress in the Three.js course. I managed to complete more than 50% and I'm currently trying to wrap my head around shaders. In terms of programming, I don't have much of a problem understanding the basics of shaders and how values get passed around. The issue is, if I have a particular idea in my mind, I would have no idea how to even start without any guidance. I mean, it is kind of normal when you start learning new concepts, but I find it extra challenging with shaders. Maybe because it was working so differently from what I'm used to. Besides that, it was and still is a lot of fun to dive deeper into the topic. I feel like if you understand shaders, you have infinite possibilities. I wanted to show you one example that got displayed in the Three.js journey, the raging waves. It is basically a combination of using the provided UV map, a Perlin noise function, and adding some colors to make it look pretty. And you could just keep expanding on this. For example, you could add foam to the waves, add interactions with objects that would be in their path, and so on. I really want to get a better understanding of shaders. Since I'm currently not even close to actually starting the real portfolio and just building my Three.js playground, where I try out possible ideas and try to get a better understanding of the library, I wanted to do something else now than just working with the donut because it got kind of boring. So one of the most important things for a portfolio that displays photographs is a way to actually view those pictures. That's why in this week's episode I built my own version of a gallery. Currently, this gallery is heavily based on examples I already showcased in some of my past videos. We got the 3D gallery, which includes some nice camera movement and hover effects, a 2D gallery, which has some crazy glitch effects when you scroll through it, and lastly another 2D gallery, which has a smooth scrolling effect implemented. First of all, I had to clean up my project because it got kind of messy. The app.js file was cluttered with code from the donut. To fix this, I essentially just created a scenes folder with the donut scenes.js file and moved everything that had something to do with the donut from the app.js file in there. Good. Finally, I've got some peace in my mind. For the sake of clarity, I'm also going to create a completely new scene for my gallery so the donut doesn't get in my way. Now that everything is cleaned up, I'm ready to go start and implementing the 3D gallery. To get a good starting point, I copied the 3D gallery code and split it up into different files and components to keep everything clean. This example was based on a pretty simple data structure. An array containing objects where each is representing one image. The position and rotation property are kind of self-explanatory. And the URL property just called a function which generates a link to an image based on the ID you pass it. I already knew that I wanted to arrange the images horizontally instead, so I removed the position property from each object and calculated the positions individually. This worked out pretty well. Since the images were based on an array, I iterated over them and calculated the position based on the current index and a value which represents the distance between each image. The last thing I wanted to change up were the looks of the frame. I decided to remove the white part and adjust the hover effect to something more subtle. After scrolling through some examples and the documentation again, I found the mesh transition material. I basically added all the values to the debug UI and played around with them. Now this is looking cool. Both of the 2D gallery examples have really cool scroll effects, and even though it would probably be overkill in a real application, I wanted to implement both of them. So to keep things simple, I started with the seemingly easier one. I would call it a wave life effect when you scroll through the images. Well, as it turns out, since the example was only for 2D images, I had way more problems than expected. The effect itself was pretty straightforward. It basically just changed the scale of each frame based on the scrolling position. When an image is clicked, it expands and moves all the other images out of the frame. The problem was, I had to animate the image frame, the image itself, and the text displayed right next to it, and each of them were behaving a bit differently. All of this basically boils down to hours of playing around with values and getting a better understanding of the code and how it was working, until I got something that I was satisfied with. Even though Three.js and everything around that you have to learn has a pretty steep learning curve, it is a lot of fun for me right now. The past few days I learned a lot of new stuff about how you can utilize noise, easy ways to animate 3D objects. Honestly, there are so many different ways. And to add onto all of that, I feel like I slowly start getting back into React as well. I wanted to thank you for all your support. I just reached 1000 subscribers and this number actually feels insane. This just keeps my motivation up and I have a lot of fun producing these videos when I know that there are so many people interested in what I do. Until next week, See ya.